This is the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Loki, Season 2, Episode 1, Ouroboros.
If we don't protect it, what on earth are you suggesting?
Protect? Is that what you think we've been doing? With all due respect, ma'am, we haven't been protecting. We've been destroying. There are people with lives on those branches, and we have committed atrocities every time we prune one. Yes.
Take caution in your tone.
Call it whatever you want, but we have to take a moment to understand
We don't
what is
have
happening.
a moment.
You've made your position clear.
So we don't have time for protocol now?
And you've made your position clear, Hunter.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders. Yes, this is Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we are back in the world of Loki for Season 2, Episode 1, Ouroboros. I'm one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your other hosts, Derek. Yes, 2 years since last time we were talking about Loki Season 1.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And I'm one of the few of the current crop of Marvel TV shows to get a Season 2.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I think the only other one is What If right now.
Yeah,
isn't
absolutely.
It? Yeah. Loads of other shows that could have potentially had a Season 2. There's lots of shows like Moon Knight could have had a Season 2.
Absolutely.
Miss Marvel could have had a Season 2, although
certainly
she may still get a Season 2 since she's coming up in the Marvels, coming out in November. So that may follow on as Season 2 of Miss Marvel. But yeah, Loki being the first one. One big change since Season 1 of Loki is that Kate Herron, who was one of the lead showrunners and lead executive for the show, is no longer on the show. Michael Waldron has taken over showrunner duties for this one. He was a lead writer on Loki Season 1, and he wrote Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, of course. So he's taking over duties here. Apparently, Kate said after the first season, she'd worked on the show for about 3 years to get that season out there, and she just said she felt she'd given everything she could. It was time for somebody else to take over.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
It must be exhausting. So,
sure.
And I think Michael Waldron is certainly one of the key players in this current phase.
He is.
So, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
But fellow Defenders, welcome back. Last time we were doing the Defenders podcast, it was for Secret Invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we still do have the pub quiz results to provide you with.
We do.
We're going to wrap it up together with the Wheel of Time pub quiz, the Gen V pub quiz, and also the Ahsoka pub quiz as well. So there'll be 4 quizzes that will be giving results, and also wrapping up those 4 shows. So apologies, fellow Defenders, for the delay in doing that. We have just been absolutely run off our feet with podcasts, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
It is a good thing.
And also, we've been away. If you've been listening along to the podcast, we went away for a weekend to go and see
recently
a concert, Manchester Orchestra in Manchester, which was absolutely great. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But now we're back. Loki released on Friday this weekend. We were lucky enough to see it a couple of weeks ago, but didn't get a podcast recorded because we didn't have time to record it. And you may also notice there's only 2 of us here. Chris can't join us for this podcast. He's only able to join us for a few podcasts a week, but he will be joining us later on in this season of Loki, just like he'll be joining us for Gen V when we start to get down to just 2 podcasts a week.
Yes. But if you are new to the podcast, fellow Defenders, please pop on over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can subscribe to any mischievous or godlike podcast player of your choice. You can also send in your thoughts, theories, observations, critiques of all things around Loki Season 2. Send in your emails to feedback at tvpodcastindustries.com. And also you can head on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, where we will also have our spoiler posts of each and every episode of Season 2 of Loki. But I think with those announcements, we can move on into our spoiler-filled discussion of Loki Ouroboros.
That's hard to say, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, I always thought of it as Ouroboros.
That's what I always thought it was pronounced as well. And Ouroboros.
And the first time I heard it was on Red Dwarf, so I've always heard it in a Liverpool accent as Ouroboros, which was the explanation for how Dave was left as an eternal child, for you Red Dwarf fans out there. So we're going to pronounce it the way the American show pronounces it, as Ouroboros. Right?
Yes.
And that is the character's name, so he's entitled, just like Data in Star Trek Next Generation, entitled to name himself, whatever pronunciation he wants to. But
I might just be shortening it to OB.
I think so. They did that very quickly on the show here. Yes, but once again, you've mentioned already, the head writer for this season of Loki Season 2 is Michael Waldron, who we've mentioned already. This episode was directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who we will know very well as they directed 2 of the 6 episodes of Moon Knight, and were quite central in the development of Moon Knight, and that concept for the show.
What a great show.
It really was. This episode was written by Eric Martin, who wrote episode 4 of season 1 and co-wrote the season 1 finale. So really interesting that he's back here for the first episode of the second season, taking loads of springboards off that first season.
Yeah, excellent stuff.
Yeah. So John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for Loki 201, Ouroboros?
Sure. Loki discovers that he is uncontrollably warping across time in the Time Variance Authority, or TVA, headquarters. In the past, Mobius M, Mobius and Hunter B-15 don't recognize Loki, and the TVA attempt to apprehend him. In the present, Loki reunites with Mobius and warns him of the threat of the many variants of He Who Remains, the TVA's creator. Still warping between different times, Loki and Mobius go to meet the TVA technician Ouroboros, or OB, who deduces that Loki is time-slipping, a phenomenon possibly caused by the instability of the timeline branches caused by the death of He Who Remains. To stop Loki's time-slipping, OB instructs Mobius to approach the temporal loom with the temporal aura extractor device to extract Loki from the time stream as Loki prunes himself. The endeavour is filled with risk, as Mobius realises that his skin could be flayed from his body, while Loki could be turned into spaghetti and lost to time. Loki time slips to the future, where he briefly encounters Sylvie, before he is pruned by someone at the last possible second. In addition, Loki discovers that the temporal loom will go critical in the future. Mobius successfully pulls Loki from the time stream, and the two of them set out to find Sylvie, just as many TVA hunters are ordered by General Dox to search for her. In a mid-credit scene, Sylvie enters a branch timeline in Broxton, Oklahoma in 1982, and visits a McDonald's restaurant where she wants to try everything, including the new Chicken McNuggets.
I'm sure there's lots more branded products coming from McDonald's later on in the season. I think they reeled through about 15 items from their menu in just that one scene.
I know. What an advert. What a product placement.
Well,
Golden Arches.
If you go into your McDonald's right now, they have had a promotion going on connected with the Loki TV show. So I'm sure they paid a lot of money to connect to it. I'm not sure whether this is the show that will sell Happy Meals to kids, though.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure either. And not too much time slipping going on in McDonald's. Maybe a bit of bowel slipping after some of that food. But yeah, for sure.
We are not sponsored by McDonald's, clearly.
Obviously, yes.
Good stuff.
But enough of all that chit-chat around McDonald's menu. Mm-hmm. Let us get into our top 5 variants for season 2 of Loki.
Yes, as you'll remember, if you were with us for season 1, instead of top 5 points, we talk about our top 5 variants. But there are major moments from the episode that we want to talk about overall. So let's get into variant number 1, John.
Yes. The past.
Yes.
No one remembers Loki. Yes, he's kind of like a fugitive again, like we saw in season 1, with Mobius and Hunter B-15 certainly don't recognize him, don't know who he is, and so are chasing him around the TVA.
Yeah, this was the big cliffhanger, I suppose, at the end of season 1, when we found out we were going to be getting a season 2. We saw this moment where Mobius is staring at the person that he's spent all this time with throughout season 1 and doesn't even recognize him. So he's being chased through the streets of the TVA, or at least through the office corridors of the TVA. Did the TVA look a bit bigger to you, a bit more vast this time? There's definitely a lot more going on in the background with the flying mail trucks all going everywhere.
Definitely. I think this is kind of one of the interesting things about this episode is just those differences that you see as you have this time slipping from Loki. And it's also I thought it was a pretty cool effect. I did like how he sort of warped and then just disappeared.
Yeah, that was very cool.
It was really cool. But you see a lot of sort of the present TVA. Those views are covered up. So I'm guessing back in the past, and you see He Who Remains as the main statue there. So yes, a lot of changes suggestive that in the present, that He Who Remains is trying to sort of obscure the fact that he is involved with the creation or the setting up of the TVA. So all those different visual changes as you move backwards and forwards are really, really good, I think.
Yeah, really cool. I just love how Loki gets away here as well, where he's surrounded by all the members of the hunters and by Mobius, and then just jumps off the side, lands on the back of a mail truck, and then falls in through a window where one of the other TVA agents from season 1, Casey, is inside. And then we see the mail truck fall back out the window. I was certain he'd just killed the driver of that truck. But you do see it flying off in the background. So she'll be fine. She'll be fine.
No truck driver harmed in the making of this episode for sure.
Exactly.
But yeah, Casey also doesn't recognize Loki here. So kind of fish out of water here in the past, as this is a new phenomenon as he sort of warps in front of them as well, and jumps back into the present. Something is going on for the people in the past, but Loki is going backwards and forwards. And I really enjoyed how this was done, and certainly as the main thrust of the episode was moving forward in the present, and Loki just jumped to that room in the past, or indeed in the future later on in the episode. But in particular, I like that moment where he is in the judge's council meeting room, where he has all the faces of He Who Remains coming out of the back, whereas in the present you have the timekeepers, which from season 1 we knew to just be robots.
Exactly.
Animatronics even.
Yeah, and we know now, because we've seen other variants of this character in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. We know now this is Kang and all the Kang variants. I think at the time we were questioning it when we were reviewing season 1. We had heard of the casting of Kang, but then when Jonathan Majors came out as He Who Remains and never mentioned the name Kang at all, we were going, who's this guy? But is he connected to Kang? Is that what he's going to be named in the future? But we see here, as you say, that the mural that's on the wall has multiple different versions of Kang. I guess we can start calling him now.
Yeah, definitely. But interestingly as well, in the past here, as Loki is in that council chamber, he does play a recording, which is of He Who Remains speaking about Ravonna Renslayer being the main person in his team, that what he did he couldn't have done without her.
Exactly.
And he's looking forward to ruling with her. So, at the moment, Renslayer is missing from the present world. So that is like an interesting hook that Loki picks up from the past to bring back to the present.
Yeah, we saw her disappear at the end of season 1, and she isn't in this episode at all. But yeah, an interesting little moment there for Loki, that he has now seen the connection between those two. Obviously, last season he saw the connection between Miss Minutes and He Who Remains, but here he's picking up on that connection between Renslayer and He Who Remains.
Yeah, but we have Loki talking to Mobius, saying that Miss Minutes can't be trusted in this episode, as he, like you say, Miss Minutes was there with He Who Remains at the end of time.
Exactly.
So yes, these things starting to sort of, this new information starting to be given to Mobius, as ultimately Loki is bouncing between different times.
Yeah.
On the same timeline, though, ultimately.
Well, yes, I suppose the whole thrust of the show is that there's one sacred timeline that all of the branches have been pruned off of. So it's different to what we saw in Avengers Endgame, I suppose. At this stage, everything's been pruned up to this point. So if he jumps backwards in time, he's on the same timeline as he's in the present timeline. He's not creating a new branch, I suppose, which is kind of interesting. But there is lots of stuff going on. Like, you can see it from their monitoring systems that they have in the TVA. You see all these branches that have now breached that red zone that used to get them pruned off the timeline. So there's lots of branching timelines going on. But we see here Loki's jumping between previous ones and a previous time and now, where everybody remembers him effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, some people remember if he's done something specific. We'll probably talk about it a bit later on when we get to meet Ouroboros.
Yes. Shall we move on to Variant 2 as we flip-flop between the past, the present, and the future? But this time, Variant 2, the present.
I suppose the big thing that's happening in the present here is that that Mobius and B-15 are watching all these brand new timelines that are coming in, and they have now got the realization that they were stolen from a timeline and brought to the TVA. So they had their own lives, they had their own things going on, and they're having that great discussion between the two of them going, how do we tell everybody this? You know, your entire life was stolen away. Everybody that you know is probably dead because we pruned that timeline. And the things you thought were your gods, well, they were just robots.
Yeah, and this kind of all plays out in the new Judges Council meeting, in the War Room, as they call it, because of all this branching beyond the red thresholds of the sacred timeline, where we have General Dox and Judge Gamble that want to see Mobius and B-15 to explain, because you see that the branches are no longer being pruned based on the orders of Hunter B-15, because, as she explains, you know, we're all variants. We all had a life on the timeline.
Exactly.
That was being taken away from us. That effectively, we haven't been protecting the sacred timeline. We have just been destroying people's lives in other times. And
she's even calling it
atrocities.
Exactly. She's calling it atrocities. She's calling it like genocide for everybody that lives in that timeline. They're all pruned and all gone, and their existence is taken away from them. Yeah, I really like this discussion.
And I mean, you have that coming back with Hunter X05 here, who calls Mobius and B-15 to the war room, where Hunter talks about the jet skis, the big thing about Mobius, who just kind of remembers this from some time, and it being probably his previous life where he enjoyed water sports and jet skis. You know?
Exactly. A good skidoo. Yes. Like, again, I like that that's being incorporated into season 2. You know, that was kind of a bit of a joke, and it was a bit of a red herring for people who are watching season 1, that he had this book of water skis, and everybody was trying to piece it together. And potentially we might see by the end of this season what is the connection between Mobius and the water skis. But this discussion is really interesting as they're talking in the new Judges Council, trying to fight with them and trying to tell them what's actually happened at the end of time with He Who Remains, trying to tell them, you know, we have to stop what we were doing in the past. We were just doing his bidding, and his bidding was to keep one sacred timeline, which is the one that establishes him as the person ruling over everything, effectively.
Absolutely. And that's great, with Loki sort of warping back from the past into the war room and showing everyone in the war room that behind the mural of the timekeepers, who are effectively fake, you have the busts of Kang looking in all directions. Cool. And you have Loki saying, you know, it is He Who Remains created this place, the TVA, and has been hiding that fact and stealing people from the timeline for the TVA. So to the point of Mobius's jet ski past life, or, you know, wherever Hunter B-15 was. And I love this kind of realization, you know, that the pruning was to prevent other variants of He Who Remains, so that's, I should say, that sacred timeline of the He Who Remains who does rule over everything. I just thought that was really, cool, actually.
Yeah. And I hope we can start calling him something else, in the future, because
I'm just going to call him Kang.
It's such a mouthful calling him He Who Remains, isn't it? Over and over again.
We'll just call him HWR or something or Kang.
Yeah, I won't remember that. Let's just call him Kang.
Let's just call him Kang.
Good stuff. Oh, and we should really call out here, Liz Carr back again for almost 3 shows in a row, John. Liz Carr in Witcher season 3 this year, which we covered back in the summertime, then on to Good Omens as an angel there. And here we have her again back in the role of Judge Gamble. Yeah. I think she was in season 1 as well, but it's kind of cool just to have her on 3 different shows over the course of the last couple of months.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Love this. She's beginning to become a mainstay of TV podcast industries as well. But the other big thing that comes out here, General Docs doesn't seem to be taking it lying down that everything that's happening is against what they used to do, and sends X5, this other hunter that we're seeing here, sends him back and lots of other hunters to go and find Sylvie, because she believes Sylvie's caused all of this. Yep. She's the one that's caused this whole issue by killing He Who Remains in the future, effectively. So that's, we kind of see a little bit of that in the discussion between the two of them, between General Docs and X5, but towards the end of the episode, we see B-15 looking on as there's hundreds, it seems, of hunters going through the time windows back.
Well, and ultimately, General Docs and Judge Gamble don't see eye to eye here, in that Judge Gamble does hold up Hunter B-15's ruling of not pruning the variants on the other branches. And so she upholds that, whilst General Docs, in a sense, is wanting to get back to the sacred timeline in another way by getting and pruning Sylvie as the source of all the chaos that's happening after she killed He Who Remains at the end of season 1.
Exactly. Yeah. That's most of what's going on in the present. Let's just quickly talk about the future. We will, of course, talk about Obi as our major variant in Variant 4, but just quickly to talk about what's happening in the future as Loki arrives there and sees what's going on around him, because I thought it was quite interesting when you look at that board that Mobius and B-15 were looking at in the present. That board had all the timelines bursting off of it. As Loki arrives, you see that board again, and on it, everything's merging back into one central timeline. Everything's coming back to this, potentially this sacred timeline again, like He Who Remains wanted in the first place. We don't know how far in the future this is at all yet, but we do know that everybody's being evacuated from the TVA. We hear the announcements over the tannoy, possibly from Miss Minutes, telling people to go and get their evacuation shuttle out of this place because it's about to go down.
Yeah, so this temporal loom, which seems to be the power engine of where time is created, and the energy for that, it says on this temporal loom has gone critical. And so, you can see the TVA things falling apart. And this is all suggested even at the present, with the power surges and the flickering of lights. OB does say how this has something to do with the temporal loom and what they need to do now. But absolutely, by the time of the future, the TVA seems to be sort of falling apart. We also have Loki moving back to the future, so to speak, from the present in order then to enact Obi's plan. So I think that brings us to our variant 4.
Cracking through these variants. I guess even though there's a lot of technobabble in this episode, like Star Trek speak almost at times, it's reasonably straightforward.
It is.
There's a lot going on, and they have to go back through, I guess, new versions of descriptions of those timelines and variants and that kind of stuff. But reasonably straightforward. We have to save Loki here from slipping through time. Is the big
and it's
thing.
kind of a heavy information dump.
Oh yeah.
Not only because for the audience and from linking it to season 1, but even because you're moving between the past, the present, and the future. It's that so that Mobius and Hunter B-15 also catch up on the events at the end of time.
Exactly.
Which they weren't there for. So I think, yes, on to variant 4. Obi has a plan to stop Loki time slipping.
Yes.
Which is kind of, the main kind of aspect here in the present, is the plan. And again, this warping, this slipping between different times, I loved how that played into Mobius and Loki going down to the basement of the TVA to see Ouroboros, and him not having any memory of Loki, and then this temporal aura extractor, but then Loki warping back to the past, having the conversation to inform the future. So I loved this whole sequence. I thought it was really good. I mean, I actually thought the jumping here between past and present was really good. I thought the sequences were really good, played out well, linked the realization of Loki, or the realization of Obi in this case, with then what was happening in the present. So I thought it was really well done. I liked how this played out.
Oh, absolutely. And so well played by Ke Kwan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here, most recently, everybody knows now, I'm sure, that he was involved in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Fantastic time travel movie. Really, really loved it.
Yeah. Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom.
Of course, and the Goonies when he was a kid.
And the Goonies. Loved. Yeah, absolutely. So pleased that he's back. And I loved him here. Sort of having been down in this basement, seemingly taking the cash from the tills, or the instructions, whatever he was taking out of the tubes in order to process them and send them back. And I kind of just really enjoyed this, and how he remembered Mobius, but Mobius didn't remember him, and just, that awkward moment which everyone's kind of had at some point, where it's like, I don't remember your name.
Yeah. But I've seen you once. You're my best friend. I've seen you once. How long ago was that? Thousands of years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
Well, no, he says maybe 3, 4, 400 years. It's like, oh my goodness. That was really good. I loved it. I thought he brought a great sense of, just lightness and humor to it. But he's also the technician of this piece.
Absolutely. But he just brings so much joy to us, so much fun to this, whole proceeding. Like, he's such an excitable character, and, I don't want to paint someone with something from their career for 30 years ago, and that's the only thing that sparks in your mind. But you absolutely see the joy of his characters from Goonies, and his character from Temple of Doom still there in the background. You can still feel it's the same person. He's got such a great presence, and I think it's really well needed in this episode, which is, as you said earlier on, just a lot of exposition going on. A lot of people talking in rooms and running from one room to another room while they're getting across everything that's going on. But then to take a pause with this character of Obi as he tries to parse out what's going on. He looks like he is the only engineer working for the TVA. He basically says he works all day, all night, as part of the team underground, and nobody above ground seems to recognize who he is and what he does. But they may think there's a whole team of engineers down there keeping the TVA afloat. It seems like it might just be Obi.
It looks like it, and he knows all the key areas of the TVA. I really just enjoyed this. As I say, the sequencing backwards and forwards,
as Loki talks to him in the past, and he remembers what he's saying to him in the present when he's talking to Mobius and Loki. I think that's really interesting as well.
So all of a sudden he just pulls out the temporal aura extractor, because Loki had that conversation. Well, if it is possible, theoretically, because Obi doesn't believe that you can time slip in the TVA, but if it is theoretically possible, how would you kind of rectify it? So there is this temporal aura extractor built that would be used to pull Loki out of the time stream in the temporal loom, to effectively to prune himself from all the different timelines and bring him back into this kind of present as we've been describing it.
So does this mean, given last season we got loads and loads of Loki variants, some really cool ones. We got Alligator Loki, of course, and Kid Loki, and we had Richard E. Grant as classic Loki as well, of course, but do you think this means, as Loki's being pruned and then this device is being used to pull him from the timeline into one location, does that mean we're not going to get any more variants of Loki in this season?
I'm guessing that it's going to be reduced for sure. I think it's just going to be focusing on this Loki, the one that we know.
And Sylvie, who is also Loki.
And Sylvie as well, yeah. So Sylvie will be the only variant. I think also as well, part of that was trying to also describe the timelines and the branching and all that. But again, we're getting more of that around the time loom, which is, as I say, is like the hub for the creation of time, and is in trouble here. What we do find out from Obi on the time loom is that it is Miss Minute who looks after it ultimately, and Obi just does and runs diagnostics sort of every 1,000 years or so.
Yes.
So again, Miss Minutes can't be trusted. We see there are these power surges. It looks like the temporal loom is in trouble. So, whether again, it's another part of the nefarious plans of He Who Remains, and so on. Who knows? But I kind of like how this is setting up, this temporal loom is this hub here, and this is what is making Loki time slip and the issues that we see throughout the present TVA. Okay, it's just flickering of lights at the moment, but we see in the future it's much worse.
Yeah.
The other side of it is it needs Mobius to go out through the doors, and there is a high risk of spaghettification.
Yes.
Once you've gone through kind of the big blast doors, and he has to wear this great suit. I mean, it does feel like something out of Jules Verne and sort of,
2001 maybe, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking more going underwater in the old kind of swimsuits, I guess, or whatever they were called,
The Iron Lung, I guess.
The Iron Lung, yeah. It feels like that, but the time will effectively age this suit as you're in there. Yeah. And so it will strip it back and it will age it until it hits your skin, and then it will just be like your skin peeling off.
Yes.
Which Mobius is a little hesitant to do this. And of course, it all becomes very last minute. We have OB having to close the blast doors. Mobius unlikely to get back through them in time because he's sort of trying to give Loki every moment of time to prune himself after warping away. But it is very last minute, and by who, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know who prunes Loki in the future.
Yeah. Someone off screen, effectively.
Unless it was Sylvie, because he does see Sylvie, and unless she kind of did a jab through the partly open door.
Maybe. Yeah, she was directly in front of him and said, oh, there you are, to him as he arrived. So maybe it is Sylvie saying, oh, there you are. She was trying to find him. Maybe.
But then it looked like it was coming from behind, but you don't see who pruned him.
Yeah. And who was ringing the phone? And why were they ringing the phone?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
A few bits of unexplained stuff there.
I suppose it's a setup for a season, so you're not supposed to have everything explained to you immediately. But yeah, as Loki arrives back, saving Mobius, knocking him back through the door.
Just in the nick of
time. He says to him they need to find Sylvie, right? So now we have everybody focusing on Sylvie. We have General Doxon and X5 and their team effectively, and now we have Mobius and Loki going after as well. So that's quite an interesting place to end it. I did love those scenes with Obi. I thought he was great at explaining all of the little intricacies of it. But what I also loved was when Mobius realizes that the glass is cracked on the only thing keeping him possibly alive, and of course the handy tape comes out.
Yeah, the bit of gaffer tape.
The gaffer tape comes out to
tape,
save his life. Yes,
exactly.
So,
Good.
Really liked it.
Really did. Yeah. I think with the fact that everyone in the present day TVA is looking to find Sylvie, I think we should go on to our variant 5, which is Sylvie.
Before we say that, there is a post-credit scene in this episode, fellow defenders, in case you didn't see it, and that's what we're about to talk about now. So if you didn't see it, pop back into the episode, go on to the post-credit scene, because it is kind of important what's happening in the scene.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Right.
I mean, well, I guess we've entitled variant 5, Sylvie is brought back to you by McDonald's.
Yes.
So it's effectively we see her arriving at Broxton, Oklahoma through a portal in 1982, where there is a period McDonald's there, and her arriving into that and asking the guy behind the counter, what do I do? How do I do this?
Yes.
And he's like, well, what do you want? Maybe you could try some of our new chicken McNuggets. He mentions fillet of fish, and she's
quarter pounder with or without cheese, maybe a Big Mac. Yeah, the whole
list is given over here, and she's kind of, he fades out and blurs out within the frame, and she's like, I want to try everything.
Yes, but there's some important things going on in the background for Sylvie here. Yeah. Remember, Sylvie was taken from her own time when she was only a child and never got to experience any of this stuff. So what she actually asks for when she goes up to the counter is make sure it's not rat or something like that. Make sure I don't have to eat something with a face. Yeah. McDonald's, you're definitely not going to be seeing any animals in the food that they've that they've. Not that they don't make food with that isn't from animals, but it won't look like an animal, certainly. Not to criticize McDonald's too much, but also as she looks around the room, she sees some young lovers together. Yeah. She sees a group of teenagers together who are all chatting away and having a good time in the 1980s in the US. Sylvie's never experienced any of this, so her line about I want to try everything is not I want to try the whole menu of McDonald's.
I was being facetious. She wants to try life.
Yes, exactly.
Choose life. That's a different property.
It is a different property. But I'm absolutely certain McDonald's will be using Sylvie wants to try everything on our menu in future advertising. And we will definitely be seeing the Golden Arches back in next week's episode.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
And maybe Sylvie will be sort of, what was the famous documentary where the guy just lived on McDonald's? Quarter pounders or something like that, or Big Macs, and gradually he went grey and like sunken eyes and sort of almost bordering sort of pre-type 1 diabetic.
Yes, supersize me.
That was it, yeah. So
where he ate it just
hopefully
for
she doesn't turn out like that.
Yeah. Well, she has to experience other stuff as well as McDonald's, so hopefully. But yeah, so I thought this was actually, when I watched it the second time, I thought it was a better tag scene than originally.
Yes.
What I thought it was just an ad for McDonald's. Whereas it does tie in quite well with Sylvie's story.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Well, fellow defenders, I think that wraps up our variants for episode 1, Ouroboros. So, Derek, any notes for the episode?
Only note I have, because as I said, there does seem to be a lot going on in the episode. I think we talked about most of it, but the only note I have, Broxton, Oklahoma, the location of that McDonald's that Sylvie heads to at the end of the episode. I think that is where New Asgard is located in the comic books, where Thor brings Asgard to. So since Sylvie is a variant of Loki and also an Asgardian, it's just interesting that she landed there.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I say interesting. I know the writers knew that's what they were doing. They wouldn't have picked it otherwise. But yeah, I like that. That's a connection there to New Asgard from the comic books, not from the MCU. But of course, that's a very different place.
Yeah.
John.
The only couple of notes from me is I just kind of like the shorthand that they did for showing you that Loki had gone to the past with the crack in the mosaic on the floor, with showing the shield of the TVA and that having a crack in it when Loki came back and was suddenly recognized. So I kind of just like that little shorthand. I thought it was nicely done. And I have to say, the whole stuff inside the temporal loom, I thought visually looked amazing.
It was really cool.
I thought it was really cool. I thought seeing the degradation of Mobius's suit was really, really good. And just all that visual I thought was really nicely done, to be honest. Yeah. And also the only other note is apologies for, I don't know how many times I've probably called Mobius Morbius, but because throughout my notes I've called him Morbius, and I know it's Mobius.
Yes, Mobius M. Mobius, and I've probably done it as well. I think we probably did that throughout the first season too. Yeah. I'm sure we'll continue to do it. But yes, might as well get the apology out up front.
Definitely.
Was there a moment here with Obi where he gives the manual of the TVA to Loki as well, and is saying there's some really complex concepts in there, but everybody has one of these books on their desk.
Yeah, it's kind of like the orange training manual.
Yeah, and it's like something that, is a reference book that Obi has written himself of all the things that he knows, but nobody reads it. They just go straight to the man, straight to the source and get him to fix their problems. But nobody goes down and actually talks to him.
No.
So, of course, poor engineers and IT departments based in basements.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff.
Excellent stuff. Derek, do you defend Loki Season 2, Episode 1, Ouroboros?
I do. It's a good start to the new season. It's kind of a middling episode because you got to set up so much. And in this show, Loki Season 1 was massively complex. We went through multiple timelines, multiple different time periods, from the start of time to the end of time almost. It felt like a Doctor Who series in 6 episodes last season. So setting all that back up after 2 full years as well. And we've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. We've seen Multiverse of Madness. We've seen all these big concepts in the MCU as well. So kind of coming back into it and having to have all that laid out again does mean that the episode had a lot to bear in it. So I'm hoping that there'll be a bit more momentum in it next week. I did like that we have more regular characters from last season back, characters like Casey, who didn't have a huge part in last season, seeing them back here having a bit more of a role. So we have a bit more of a team around us in the TVA, not just Mobius, a bit of B-15 and Loki like we had last season, and obviously Ramona Renslayer, who's now gone. But it'll be good to have an actual full cast, an ensemble cast a bit more in this season. I felt like we got a little bit of that in the first episode, so hopefully that continues in the rest of the season. How about yourself, John? What's your final thoughts on Loki Season 2, Episode 1? Do you defend it?
Yeah, I do defend this episode. I'd give this 4 regularity prunes out of 5. I just kind of really like this quite simple premise of going backwards and forwards through time in order to move this fairly simple story of catching Mobius up and trying to stop Loki from time slipping and jumping, and to kind of settle him down, I guess, in the timeline. I love the introduction of Obi, really good. I can't wait to see more of this character throughout the show. These little nuggets around, Miss Minutes can't be trusted, and hearing the recording of He Who Remains, speaking to, Ravonna Renslayer as, effectively almost like his right hand, general, and wanting to rule with her. So I really like those. I want to see how they play out. And that mid-credit scene, seeing Sylvie in Broxton, see where that goes, but also seeing her in the future as the TVA seemingly is disintegrating, and who pruned Loki. Yeah. Maybe potentially Obi, because I feel it has to be someone who knew that needed to be done.
Well,
ultimately.
Yeah, or Mobius or Loki, exactly. All the people that were in that room. Yeah.
So I really, really enjoyed this, for sure. Yeah. And like you say, I like some of the other characters here, maybe getting a bit more of a part. Certainly, I think for me, Hunter XO5 was, I don't recall that character
don't think he was
massively from season 1, but also General Dox and Judge Gamble as well. So good to see them. So 4 regularity prunes out of 5 for me.
Excellent. Looking forward to the second episode. Before we get on to there, though, let's go on and find out some feedback from our fellow defenders. First up, we got an email in from Victor Timely Von Doom. Well done.
Very
Another
good.
Change of name for this season, Victor. Good stuff. He says, "Greetings, fellow variants. Yes, Loki is back and better than ever. The action and effects were really on par. Loki's constant time slipping almost made me nauseous. X5 and General Dox smell like trouble. Wasn't Kate Dickie the crazy queen from Game of Thrones?
She certainly was.
How did she know about the end of time? Interesting. I hope there's a moon door nearby. Also, there is no grey area with Obi. The news is either good or very bad. Looks like Sylvie has some variants as well. She seemed like a child visiting McDonald's for the first time. I'd like to know the numbers involved in their deal with Marvel. Looking forward to podcast feedback and episode 2, Excelsior, Victor Timely Von Doom."
Excellent stuff, Victor. Yes, Kate Dickie is certainly the crazy moon door lady from Game of Thrones.
Yes.
And I totally agree. I think the effects and action really stunning in this episode. it'd be useful to know what the numbers are with this deal. Yeah, I mean, this seems to be the most on the nose product placement as of yet.
Without a doubt.
You know, so...
And there were so many opportunities last season where we had them visiting supermarkets or taking... well, I think there was even in the first episode, there was like a bar that was taken from the future and brought back in time that you could tell, you know, that they were out of time. So you'd use a Snickers or something like that to have some kind of deal. But yeah, here the McDonald's placement seems quite significant.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Victor Von Doom, for the feedback. Always great to get your thoughts as well. We also got an email through from Coffee and Vodka who says, "A greeting, fellow time-slipping defenders. This has been one of the strangest binge sessions ever. From a sexual predator's blown up genitals to a big flaming dragon to lard-fried McDonald's French fries. Time-slipping, I get. But Obi saying that the timelines were created in the TVA made my former understanding of variant timelines being natural events manifesting after one's apparent behaviour uncertain. Also, how would going after Sylvie after she's already killed He Who Remains fix anything? I'm sure this will be explained, but in the meantime we've got Loki, B-15 and Mobius back together again. This time with Kehu Kwan's OB joining their ranks. Good times. Also, it had a very Matrixy feel to it. Looking forward to the next episode, and of course, enjoy your time off. 4 missing Miss Minutes, temporarily elastic Lokis, and unchanged Kangs out of 5. Peace and take care. Coffee and Vodka." Thanks so much, Coffee and Vodka. Yeah, absolutely. I think here the, you know, the difference in explanations between the timelines, and all that is noticeable. And I think, at least for the time being, I'm reading it as that He Who Remains has been hiding a lot from these employers at the TVA. Not just his identity and their previous lives, but presumably an awful lot more. And I think that is opening up through Obi with the time loom and all these other more sort of, you know, in the engine room of time itself. So it'd be interesting to see how that sort of gets explained through this series for sure. And like yourself, having all these characters back together again, along with Obi joining them, is really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked your comment there, Coffee Vodka, about the binge session. So last Friday when the Loki episode 1 came out, at exactly the same time, the final episode of Wheel of Time season 2 came out, and the 4th episode of Gen V all released at the same time. It's like back in the day when NBC used to do their must-see TV Thursday nights, because it's out at that time in the evening, like when Friends and Eeyore and stuff like that was all back to back. So while we may be getting lots of streaming services, when you can watch anything whenever you want to watch it, they release it all of the time that they want you to watch it, which is Thursday, 8 p.m.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Thanks, Coffee and Vodka.
Yeah, thanks, Coffee and Vodka.
Let's pop on over to Facebook. First up, Heather Wallace says, "I'm here for the ride, but I have no idea what's happening or how tree branches and multiverses fit together. Is there one sacred timeline that runs through all the multiverses? I don't see how a time variation would ever lead to a universe where there is an alligator Loki." I'm going to count the number of hair tosses Loki has each episode. There were at least 3 in this episode. I noticed that the first time watching through this episode as well. Just seeing Tom Hiddleston on the ground, throwing his hair back, his beautiful, luscious locks. Let's just be honest. The director was having a lot of fun with that, greasing up those locks and making them look absolutely perfect every time he threw his hair back. I suspect there'll be more later on this season. It's definite Tom Hiddleston Loki move, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good stuff, Heather. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to know how a Loki alligator would form. I guess I'm just going with its infinite timeline. So some weird and crazy event happened at some point, you know, possibly at a Mardi Gras in New Orleans. One moment. Who knows?
Well, it's a multiverse of possibilities. So everything is possible in the multiverse. And then there's timelines that branch off each of those multiverse of possibilities. So,
exactly.
So
it's a lot.
It is, but I suppose last season, all of those Loki variants being pulled together. Some are variants of our Loki who all look the same and have just made different decisions. other are multiversal variants of Loki that look really different. So a Loki that was a giraffe, or a Loki that was a tree, or something like that. So what we saw last season was loads of multiversal variants coming together, and loads of different timeline branches that those were snipped off from in different multiverses. There we go.
Exactly. So it's an infinity lasagna with spaghetti running through it.
There you go. Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that.
Really complex. I hope they're able to explain it as we go along throughout the season. But great stuff. Thanks, Heather. Glad you're along for the ride.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Also on Facebook, Chris Harrelson says, this was an excellent season premiere. The stakes seem to be large, and I'm glad the Mobius doesn't know Loki bit was quickly rectified. Their relationship was one of my favourite aspects of season 1, so it's nice to see them partnering up again right from the start. Absolutely, Chris. I think they're really good together, these two characters. It's just the kind of chalk and cheese aspect of their characters,
exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
Certainly one just being a regular human and the other a god. But I mean, it's more than that.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like the company man and the man of mischief.
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
Good stuff. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And also on Facebook, Joe Herber says, good to see our characters back. Not sure what's going on yet, but that's kind of the point of the show. At first, I kept picturing Rutherford of Lower Decks when Eugene Cordero Casey talked. Speaking of Trek, the technobabble and spacesuits for rescuing Loki was more like an episode of that, so it felt a little out of place. Tom Hiddleston is great as always. I don't recall why he's wearing that harness, but it only accentuates his unusual physical presence. He and Owen Wilson are fun as usual. Maybe we'll learn more in the future, but what was ringing the phone? Maybe it was just to draw him in a direction, and who pruned Loki? How old is OB? Doesn't seem like he's human. He doesn't sleep, so what is he? He built the time loom, so did he help found the TVA? Interesting stuff, Joe. Thanks so much for that. Yes, who pruned Loki? I think be interesting to know. I think definitely someone from behind. So I know I was saying Sylvie, but I don't think it's that. But I do wonder whether it is someone who knows that he should be pruned in that moment. So it could be Mobius or OB in the future.
Or Loki.
Or Loki.
Yeah. Himself.
How old is OB? That's another one. That hadn't really crossed my mind at all. You know, you just kind of assume this sort of eternal life going on a bit with some of these characters. But I wonder if, you know, in the same way that the Timekeepers weren't real, possibly some members of the TVA aren't real, but I don't know. So I think it's more about him playing with time, and maybe we'll get to see or hear more about that.
Yeah, and remember the conversation between Obi and Mobius in this episode in Loki, where Obi says that it was 300 years ago that he saw Mobius, you know? Mobius said that in season 1, that he doesn't know how time works in the TVA, so he doesn't really know how old he is or how long he's been there. Does anybody have a room that they go to? I don't even remember that from season 1. I know Ravonna Renslayer, we saw her office, but I don't remember seeing anybody else go off to sleep either. So maybe Obi's just the first person to mention it, but maybe all of them have been there for thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. You just don't know where this is actually taking place. We're calling it the present because that's where our characters are taking off from last season, but it could be 100,000 years in the future, or it's just time doesn't work that way in the TVA. So while there are questions over Obi as to whether he's human or not because of the things he says here, I think he's probably quite similar to everybody else there.
No, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I was just positing potential for robotics or animatronics, a bit like the Timekeepers.
Yeah, maybe. But maybe he was someone that helped found the TVA alongside He Who Remains. Yes,
and thank you so much, Joe, for pointing out Eugene Cordero as who plays Casey. It's also Rutherford in Star Trek Lower Decks. I hadn't spotted it, and then I certainly spotted it after seeing your feedback. So good stuff, because I really like Rutherford.
Absolutely.
Again, he's my nerd, along with Boimler.
Yep, they're great cast of that show. Really good. Thanks so much, Joe, and thanks everybody else for your feedback. We will be back with our discussion about Loki Season 2, Episode 2 next week. We will be a little bit late next week because we're going to the UK to watch some American football in London. So we will be back on Tuesday of next week. talking about Loki Season 2, Episode 2.
Yes.
So if you want to send in any of your thoughts, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or pop on over to our group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. You can pop your thoughts on the spoiler post, which I will put up, even though we're going to be away next weekend. You can pop up your thoughts on there and we'll discuss them on the podcast when it comes out next week. Thanks so much for joining us. There are loads of other shows that we're covering. We've just finished off our coverage of Star Wars Ahsoka this week. We're covering Gen V each week as well, which is the very adult spin-off from The Boys. And also we are finishing up our coverage of The Wheel of Time Season 2 this week. Also had to delay that one because we went away. But lots and lots of stuff going on. Please make sure you stay subscribed to the podcast over at tvpodcastindustries.com. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.
Yes, and of course, remember, fellow defenders, share the podcast, because sharing the podcast is
sharing the love. Yes, it is.
Thank you so much, fellow defenders, for joining us. As always, it is a pleasure speaking with you, all things Loki. Cannot wait to come back to you on episode 2 of this second season of Loki. But in the meantime, as always, keep watching, keep listening, and keep defending. Bye.